And we are recording. Good morning. It is Monday. I hope you all had a great weekend and got a bunch of rest. Today, actually, this weekend we had a really interesting question come across across Zendesk, and today's cast is going to be about tracing. It's going to try to answer that question. Before we get into it, I want to say that we are on the verge of releasing the next version of Flow, and it is packed with lots of little goodies. So it has been a busy summer for us over here. And the announcement's going to come either later today if we pack it all up and get it all tested and launched properly. Otherwise, it'll be tomorrow. So depending on where you live, you're either going to see it late tonight or early tomorrow morning. Okay? So now let's get back to the question. The question was, can I use a path to define the motion of another layer? And this straight up, and what that means is, can we take a shape and then attach a layer to that shape and have that define its motion across the screen? And the straight answer to that question is no, you can't actually do that technique yet. Now, there are other apps that do have that feature, and it is exactly something that we have been thinking about for a long time to bring into Flow. But the answer today, as of this moment in time, you can't do that specifically. So, but there are lots of techniques that you can use for doing tracing. And today's technique, which is about tracing the inflection points of a path, I'm going to show you that today. And for the most part, if you want to trace the motion of a path, it's actually quite easy to do. I mean, depending on the complexity of the path, fair enough. If it's crazy and all over the place, yeah, maybe not. But for most simple things, today's technique is actually going to be very fast. It's going to be very easy to understand. And you might actually end up just using that in place of this other feature for the majority of the time that you're actually doing things. Okay? So we're going to introduce that today, and then we're going to build on it for the next two casts. All right, so let's get started. We're going to go over to Flow, and we're going to create a new project here. Okay? Just going to create a new project by clicking there. Don't even know how to use Flow myself. And before we even do that, I'm going to say that this is the shape. This is the shape that we're going to trace today. It's a very simple shape. We're going to go from the left to the right. And the idea, again, behind this cast is, you have a graph or you have a picture. And what you want to do is you just want to add a tracing overlay to that picture. Okay? So let's full screen. And let's start by creating an empty timeline, and we're going to press Command I. That's going to give us this little pop-up window. We're going to be able to select our image, and now we have imported that image. It is 800 by 400. So let's go ahead, hide that, select our scene, and we're going to turn off this adjust content on resize because we don't want to resize that image inside of our scene. And we're going to make our scene 800 by 400. We're going to reveal that layer, and now we're just going to snap that into place. Okay, press 1. And it looks like I ended up making an animation here. It's because relative mode was not on. So let's just delete the animation at the end so that it has the position that we want. And let's turn on relative mode. Okay, relative mode is going to prevent us from, or it's going to have Flow not create animations as we're editing things, because we're just going to set up our animation before we get into the animating part. Before we go, when you highlight or when you're moving your mouse around and you see this little color pop up over top of a layer, that means it's selectable. Well, now we don't want the image to be selectable, so what we're going to do is we're going to press the Option button and roll over this area right here, and we're going to click right there. That's going to lock it. Now I can't select it. I can select the scene still, okay, so it's selected up here, but I can't select that image anymore. So let's go ahead and add a circle and change its fill color so that it's nice and bright and pops for you guys. I will I'm dragging the color out of one color well onto the other. That's how Mac OS works. And I'm going to change its stroke width to 0, and then I'm going to change its size right over here by clicking on the lock for proportions and changing it to 32. And then I'm just going to put it right about there. Okay, so it's going to start at that position. which is 292, and it's going to end over here. So now this is the part where I like to, this is the technique that I'm going to introduce, and it's the idea of tracing the inflection points of a path, and I do it by setting up the beginning and the end of the animation and then working backwards. This is just my technique, but it's one that would probably work for you as well. So what I mean by inflection points are any changes in the motion or any changes in the direction of the path. So at this point in time, here we go, we're moving horizontally, and then there's an inflection point where we start moving vertically, and we weren't moving vertically before. And then there's another inflection here where we stop moving vertically. And here's an inflection where we stop moving horizontally, but we move vertically. So two things sort of inflect at this point, and then we're back to this and here, and then we get to here. Okay? So the way I like to do this is I like to set up the last position to begin with. Oh, let's undo and move the playhead to the end. Okay, and now we'll make that last position just like that. So we have our motion, and it goes across like this. All right. The next thing that I want to do is I actually want my motion to feel linear, like it's moving consistently across at the same pace from beginning to end. And the way that I do that with this X position moving is to just make that curve linear. So I clicked on the curve here, and then I selected linear and came off of it. And now, so this is going to play back at a linear pace. It's not going to speed up or slow down like it does with an easing curve. It's just going to go consistently across. And we can slow that down to just have a slower look at it. Consistent, right? Okay, so now what I like to do is I like to come back to these inflection points, like this one right here. All right. And I'm going to bring, sorry, that's not what I meant to do. I meant to move this like that. Let's move it to here. Right about there. So the timing is right about there. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring that down like that. Okay. So that creates this key value here. We can move up to right about there. And then we can actually make this 200. Okay. We're going to make this 200. Just like that. All right. We know that 200 is in the middle because the height of our stage is 400. So right there is 200. And so now we have this little animation. Okay. What happened actually was that when we split the X track and the Y track, we didn't really want to split the X track, but we did. We split the X track and the Y track. It made this new curve with an ease in and ease out. We're going to switch that back to linear. And now we're hitting two inflection points there and there. Okay. Let's go back here. And we'll get to the vertical one in a second. Let's just line up all of the X ones first to begin with. So we're going to go like this. And maybe move this. There we go. We're going to get an approximate tracing to begin with, and then we're going to, we're just going to get an approximate tracing to begin with, and then we're going to modify everything afterwards. But again, we don't want that X to change. We just want it to be consistent across the entire animation. Okay, so what we can now do here is go ahead and line up this one, and let's bring it back by another 100 like that. Select, and we're going to make that Y position 200 again. Okay, so what we have is it moves, and it moves up, moves over and down, moves up, and comes into position. Now, the one trick that we don't have lined up yet is the X position. Sorry, the vertical one. Now, vertical is a little bit different. We've been modifying the Y. Now we actually want to modify the X value. So what happens with the X value? There is actually a gap that happens. There's actually a moment in time where X doesn't change. It's not going to change from the beginning of this animation all the way down. Okay? And that actually starts right here. See that? So it's coming down from this point in time all the way. What we can do is we can actually Command Option and drag this little key value right here. It's going to duplicate it. And then we're going to move this all the way over. We're going to move two things. We're going to do that. We're also going to do the same thing here. We're going to create a little gap for X. And we're going to grab this one and this one, and we're going to move them over just like that. So it comes there, and then it comes straight down, and then it follows the rest of the animation along. Quite simple, right? Let's go ahead and change our easing curves, all of them, to make them all linear. And one of the reasons I am making them all linear is because they're basically all just straight lines. So let's do, we'll select all of them. We're going to change multiple curves at the same time by clicking this icon right up here, and we're going to make them all linear. So now let's play that back. That's pretty good. But it feels to me that there's a little bit of an odd behavior right here. And that's because these two key values are off by just a little bit. So let's bring them back like that. What I did was I selected both, and then I just dragged the first key value into the right position. So now that works. And it looks to me like maybe this is off now that I changed this key value. So let's bring that key value back in a little bit. And there we go. Okay. Pretty spot on. This downward motion feels a bit fast to me. So what we can actually do, and the reason why it feels fast is just because the timing of the duration of this change is off compared to everything else. So like if I made this super short, that would speed up the animation. What we can do is we can actually just make it a little bit longer until it feels right. Maybe something like that. Let's hit play. That to me feels pretty good. So I think that we're done for the day. All right, let's have a look. Let's have a little chat about what we did. So what we did is we looked at a path. The path had a couple of different inflection points in it. We set up some basic, some easy ones. And then for the vertical one, we took this idea of pausing the X animation by creating a gap. And we created a gap by option clicking or option dragging on a key value to copy it. We did this twice. We did this first for the Y track, then we did it for the X track. Okay, we created a gap, and then after the gap was created and we moved everything over, then what we did is we just looked at the animation again and we just played with the timing and the different easing curves to get it feeling like it's moving properly across that path. Okay, and so this is the basic technique for tracing. And the idea is to find inflection points, to find the points where a curve is changing or a path is changing, align your layers with those points, and then tweak the timing and the easing curves so that they feel like that layer is actually moving along that path. Okay, tomorrow we're going to look at how to do this with multiple shapes, and we're going to add a curve to it. So we're going to add a round part of a curve, and we'll look at how to use easing curves to do that. Okay, see you tomorrow.